Welcome to Cycle Breakers and Moneymakers, a podcast for women of color and first gen who are breaking generational cycles and glass ceilings by going places no one before them has ever gone. I'm your host, leadership coach, and eldest daughter of immigrants, Mariela De La Mora. I left a 16-year marketing career to create a multiple six-figure-a-year coaching business as a single mom. Each week, you'll learn how to build unshakable self-trust, become in demand, lead with confidence, and make more money by being more of who you are. So this week, we have the incredible Maya Elious on the show. I know many of you probably have followed her journey, and today I'm just going to be asking her about growing and building her personal brand, like the realities behind it, growing a multiple $1 million business, other business lines, being first gen, all the things. So with that, welcome Maya to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about today's conversation.
Yes, me too. Okay, there's so much that I've picked up about your journey, or little things, right? I know that like me as an observer and many of us really only know the bits that you choose to share, but the parts that people know about us are really like our personal brand. Otherwise, the only thing people would quote about us is, oh, you have this offer. Mm-hmm. And I think that's one of the things that's always stood out to me about you, because I think that we tend to look to those who are doing something that we're still giving ourselves permission to do in terms of the personal side and like our stories. And I think especially as being first gen, so much of it is like, well, damn, if I'm going to do this, like I want to bring myself to the table. Whereas like in the past, maybe I have had to keep those parts at the door. So I would love to hear a little bit about growing a business, like being first gen and growing a business as first gen. What has that been like? What do you feel like the strengths have been that you brought to that? And just anything you want to share around that.
Oh my gosh. I think before I even go to the strengths, because I think there's so many great attributes of what I've learned from my parents with them being immigrants. But before you can fully appreciate the strengths, you have to talk about the fears, because the way I wanted to leverage my strength was not in the direction they wanted me to leverage it. And so my parents came to this country. They were young. They got married in Liberia, where they're from. Then they came to this country because of education. And I think my dad went to school somewhere in Europe first, and then they moved to the States. But their thought process was, we're going to live in the United States and our kids would be able to live the American dream whenever we start our family. And my dad would be able to live the American dream, right? Good education, going to a good university, getting a good job, being able to retire. That was the brand that was sold to us. And I don't even think we talk enough about how politics is a brand, right? It's all propaganda is the message that they are feeding you for what they want you to believe and have a perception of. So the perception of living in the United States is that you get to live the American dream. Yeah. And so when they finally have kids, their kids do the high school thing, do the college thing, and build their business. My sister dropped out of college. I dropped out of college. We built our businesses. And I know my parents are probably in that time frame thinking, where did we go wrong? Because how on earth did we prep them to be successful in college for them to drop out and go live these lives that we're not even familiar with, right? When I was in college, I started making money professionally as a freelancer by creating custom MySpace pages for people. And I can't even, at 18, 19 years old, when I'm doing this and I'm making money, and it's not a lot at all, but for me, it's a lot of money. At this time, I'm making $35 to $60 per client. Yeah, it's like, girl, that's not sustainable in the real world. But listen, for me, at 18, I have no rent, no bills, no car note. It's everything is profit for me at this point because I have no bills. I'm using my family laptop and all of that.
Yeah, but it shows something to your brain about I can create my own money. So I feel like when you're 18, 19 and you make money in a way that isn't a job and it's because of something you know how to do, I feel like it flips a switch in your brain.
Yeah, it does. I think the first immediate switch is, wow, I can't believe people are paying me to do something that I already do for fun and for free. And two, should I let them know that I would have done this for free anyway? It felt like a secret that I was making money, right? And so for me, it feels exciting. For my parents, it's like, this girl thinks that she's creating something real when making $100 a week is not a lot of money, and she needs to make sure she stays in school. So at the time, I don't have the level of maturity and thought process to understand what they're thinking. Now at 34 years old, I'm like, I can't imagine having a child telling me that they're going to not go after a solidified career because they're making $100 a week on TikTok. I'd be like, are you crazy? Let's map out a marketing plan. Anyhow, the fears around it, I start building my brand. I eventually build a web and graphic design agency that's making actual legitimate money, more than the $35 to $50 clients here and there.
Yeah.
And I'm making about $3,500 to $5,000 a month by the time I decide to drop out of college. But it was the scariest decision of my life because I wanted to make sure I pleased my parents. Like, my number one priority in life at the time was making sure that I was pleasing my parents. And then my second priority was making sure that I was doing what I wanted to do. Their desires for me was more important than my desires for me. So it was incredibly scary.
Do you feel like at the time you had to justify it in a way that your parents would understand? Because you know how like immigrant parents, they have certain value systems and we know how to appease to those value systems, even though we know that we have a certain plan, but it's in your logic. I'm going to explain this to you in your logic.
Oh, absolutely. But I had no strategy around how to explain it to them. And so it was honestly a disaster. I dropped out and I remember telling them, and I told my mom first, and I think my mom is such a nurturer. And in my mind, I'm like, let me tell her first so she doesn't tell my dad, who is more of like the disciplinarian, because my mom's going to accept it better than my dad.
Yeah.
I was
Maybe she could
completely
sell
wrong.
it to him depending on the dynamics. Like we know where you're like, they got to play a role. Your parents are opposite. Like one person's going to be,
Baby, let me tell you, I was so wrong. So I just remember like I was living in Charlotte, North Carolina at the time. I'm 23 years old. I had already made the decision to drop out of college. And at this point, I should have already graduated college by 23. I should have graduated at around 21, 22. But I was on academic probation for 1 year because I just wasn't doing well in college because I'm so focused on growing this business. And I think I maybe took 6 months off. So it's like I'm already behind. So I made the decision to drop out because I just wasn't doing well. I wasn't feeling it. I didn't really like a lot of my instructors, whatever. So I made that decision and I'm like, I have to tell my parents at some point. They're going to be wondering, what am I doing with my life? I remember telling them, this was in November, a few weeks before Thanksgiving. I'm at this grocery store called Food Lion and I'm like randomly in like the taco aisle because I'm like getting groceries to make tacos that night for like me and my boyfriend at the time. And I'm like, just call your mom. You have to tell her, you have to rip the Band-Aid off. And I tell her, and I'm like, yeah,
Had you dropped out already? Had you already released yourself from classes?
I had already made the decision.
That's the thing where you're just like, oh, I literally already did it.
Yeah.
And you don't want to get talked out of it too. Kind of depends on where you are in the journey of getting off the daughter of immigrant path of just like, I just remember not like, if I'm going to do this thing that I can't explain, I'm not going to tell anybody because I don't want that to steer me off my path. Okay. So
Exactly. Yeah. I'm the type of person that I'm going to tell you about it after the fact because I need to be sure in my decision and make the decision.
Yeah. You don't want to be swayed and you already know, especially with your parents, like what they're probably going to say, even though you might be wrong. But it's, this isn't going to help me to tell you beforehand. I don't want to be convinced to not second guess it.
Exactly. Okay. I might not know exactly what you're going to say, but I'm going to know your stance. So in the taco aisle on the phone with her, and I'm just like, yeah, I withdrew from all my classes. I'm not going to be going back to college. And she's like, what do you mean you're not going back to college? I'm like, yeah, I dropped out basically.
Yeah.
And this is the scariest decision of my life. And I'm looking at my mom as like the closest person to me, like, lady, I came out of your body. We are supposed to be like this. And she's like, there are children that are dying in Africa for education. Like, how could you do this? Blah, blah, blah. And I was so hurt and so pissed off. And I remember just like yelling at her and just saying all this crazy stuff. I actually did cuss her out. Also should have been the second scariest decision of my life. And she jokes about it now because she's like, wow, you were really slick thinking you could just cuss me out and hang up. But I didn't have, because I didn't go in with any strategy. I didn't have any logic to my response. I just wasn't prepared for her to not be supportive in what I needed in that moment. So
which kind of makes sense too, because it's also like a vulnerable decision that you're probably still sitting in. So it's like when you have your person that you're like, I really need you to be on my side right now. And they're not, it's like, listen, I'm already shaky on this. I'm going to do it. But you just wanted that from your mom because you were you're still her daughter. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter how old you are.
Exactly. Plus I'm 23. I'm still young and dumb if we're all being honest here. So it's like, girl.
Yes.
I'm 23. I don't know how much wisdom you're expecting from me, but just let it slide. Okay. Just
Yeah.
have my back on this one. So I was just like,
Yeah.
what the F are you talking about? This makes no sense. Why are you talking about children in Africa? I am in America and I decided to drop out of college. Yeah.
Mhm. And the
So
impossible standards that sometimes, especially whether your parents really struggled or they're just so much more aware of struggle, it's almost like this impossible standard of struggle that we're never going to touch because that's the reason why they did what they did. So it's, yeah, but I don't want to use that against myself, is that's like the whole point, is to have other options. But it's like, yeah, I'm never going to have that struggle. You're right. And
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah. So it's you're talking about kids dying for education. And I'm like, I have the option to. And now I can realize also that it's such a privilege to be able to have the decision to drop out of
absolutely.
college. Because I also understand that college is a pathway when that is your only option to get you to where you want to be. So I have so much gratitude for the options that I had and that my
Yeah.
parents created those options for me. But yeah, scariest decision. My parents are my best friends and I
Yeah.
love them. And I think it's interesting because it's like now they benefit from my decision of dropping out. They benefit from me being successful with my business.
Mm.
And I see their support now. Like now I do get that validation. They tell me that they're proud of me. They show up to my events. They ask about my business. Like when I started my podcast, my dad was like researching stuff and trying to give me tips and advice. And I just thought it was so cute.
Yeah.
So it was
That's his way of supporting. I feel like that's really
for
cute, especially
sure.
if your dad's an acts of service guy. It's just like, here, let me like help you and tell you. And you're like, okay, yeah.
Like I've only been
Um,
marketing for the past 15 years, but thanks for the tip on
yeah.
podcasting.
It's like,
But
okay, no, I
I love
know.
this too.
What was there a moment that you remember where it like you could tell that it made sense to your parents? Because I think that like some of us, our parents don't even know what we do still, but they'll see the results of it somehow. And it doesn't have to be like a big moment, like it's the day you bought a car or something like that, but
Yeah.
something where they're like, oh, this is like a real thing. But do you remember something like that where they started to, oh, Maya's okay, like she's doing well, or this makes
Right.
sense?
Man, I think it's so challenging and it could be a heartbreaking feeling because there are so many instances where they have the opportunity to get it, where they still offered criticism or doubt.
Mm.
And it's I have my like my highest revenue month, and I remember my highest revenue month years ago was like almost $7,000, and I was so excited,
Hmm.
and I didn't get the response that I wanted. And then when I was on track to make $1 million and I had posted about it, I was still met with criticism because it's like, why are you sharing your numbers online? And so it's like
That
really
makes
only within the
sense.
last 3 years that I feel like they're really getting it, and I think part of them getting it was seeing me teach in person. I think they got to see Maya Elious,
Mm.
the CEO, the entrepreneur, the businesswoman, the personal brand, and they're like, oh, I'm not seeing her as my daughter that's chasing some dream I
That
don't
makes sense.
understand. I'm seeing her living out what she already told us she wanted to do years ago.
That
And I
makes
think
sense.
that's what really made it click for them.
Oh man. What is there something that you would tell your 23-year-old self, maybe that was still holding out for approval, that you would tell her now?
Yeah, I'd say, girl, just drop out sooner. You're going to piss them off either way. Just piss them off 2 years earlier.
That's such a good point where you're like, if you're going to piss them off anyway, it's like, okay, well, I tried, you know what I mean? And they can't understand something that they literally have no frame of reference for. And I think that's the beautiful thing. It can be really hard, but it's also the beautiful thing about your children will surprise you by actually doing something that you couldn't dream of because there was no frame of reference for you. And then that friction in order for you to do what you wound up doing.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's really an understanding of if God gives you a vision, you have to just rely on your relationship with you and God to get through it and that other people don't have that same vision. But I think even my learning lesson when I do become a parent is to know how to be prayerful for my kids. I know that I have praying parents for sure. And shout out
Mhm.
to my grandparents for praying for me. Like I know where I am also because of the prayers of my parents and my grandparents.
Mhm.
I think their prayer was for me to be safe, to be successful, to be protected, to do well. I
Mhm.
think there was just a lack of specificity in how they thought it should happen. And it's, you don't get to decide the how. You can pray for the end result that you want for your child, but you don't get to decide the how. And you have to trust in God enough to know that it's going to be okay.
I think that's such a beautiful reminder and perspective around like at the root, you can have these desires, but like releasing the how around like happiness, safety, living a life of authenticity, purpose, or like whatever. Maybe it's not even purpose. They just want safety.
Yeah.
And it's, I've created it in a different way that your sacrifices and actions allowed me to have this different option. And same with kids. I have a 7-year-old daughter, and I feel like it's taught me so much. It's like I'm reliving my childhood through her, where I'm just like, oh, you're literally your own person. And I hear myself talk to her, and I'm just like, I remember what I was met with, and it was not that.
Yes. Yeah. I see that too with my nieces and nephew, and I see how my
Mm-hmm.
sister and her husband parent. They do such a phenomenal job. I
Yeah.
love that they meet their kids with a level of curiosity instead of instant
Yes.
criticism. And it's trust that your kid has a thought process with this. So,
Yeah. And that your child is an individual person. Cause I think that daughters of immigrants we're not raised to be like, you're your own person. You're like, you're a reflection of me and your family, and you're a reflection of our sacrifice. So it's like, what are you talking about? Like, you
right. You got to carry the family name well.
Yes, exactly. And we get to decide what that's like. No, but witnessing the next generation, I think really gives us permission to validate ourselves in terms of like where we're at. Because in a way, when I think about being a daughter of immigrants and having a business, it's crazy because I'm like, that's literally like the opposite of what we were modeled. But then we had to choose that. And with that, I wanted to ask you about, in terms of what entrepreneurship requires, it's like fear of failure, like being seen, your relationship with money, whew, all those things. What would you say are some of the hardest things that you've had to almost relearn, unlearn in your journey that you had to face in growing the business that you have now?
Oh my gosh. I've been through so many iterations of the business. I think
Mm-hmm.
being in an industry as an entrepreneur for more than a decade, there's
Yeah.
different versions of you, there's different trends. I think just the confidence, but I think what's so interesting is when I first started my business and I'm barely making money, I was
Yeah.
at my most confident because I didn't have a base point of what to go after. It was I had the
Mm,
generic, I want to make 6 figures, but I wasn't relying on my business to pay my bills because I was so young. Like my bills were maybe $1,000 a month and I
that makes
still had my
sense.
parents.
You
And
had the
so
attachment to, yeah.
so it's like my baseline for success is different than what everybody else is going to look like. I'm
Mhm.
19, 20 years old, trying to figure things out. And when I started my business, Instagram was not even around yet. Facebook ads wasn't really a thing yet in terms of consumers being able to use it. Facebook was still being used for college students. So just the landscape of marketing was different. And the reason I bring that up is that there wasn't a lot of comparison like how there is now.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so now when new entrepreneurs come into the game, they're instantly fearful about everybody else is already doing it. I don't know if my voice is good enough. And
Oh,
so I think as I started to develop, I'm fortunate that I had already established my brand, but now I have people mimicking my voice. Now I have people
mhm.
that's giving me more criticism. And then it's like, oh, now I have to be a little bit more mindful. Like when my brand got bigger, that's when more fear and hesitation started to kick in because now I have a lot more eyes and a lot more opinions on the things that I
Mhm.
say. And so
Yeah.
just navigating that as a recovering people pleaser has been like, I've got to learn how to really trust my own voice.
Yeah, and it makes sense because I think that there's almost like this like naiveness around like we succeed from like a naive perspective in a good way when we first start because we have no expectations and everything is magic. It's just, oh, I don't know, I'm just going to do this. I'm just going to do that. And
Yeah.
I think especially if it isn't as much of a crowded landscape, but then eventually it's like you stand to lose in your mind. You're like, either I have something to lose and I have something to gain. And the something
Yes.
to gain is what you've seen other people do. And then the something to lose is like you have a reputation and
Mm-hmm.
it, yeah, and more eyeballs like on you. So I know that it can become a lot like, wow, like how was I so fearless and all of that? How, what would you say is something that helped you that maybe other people don't do and keeps them stuck? And I'll tell you what I mean by this, that one of the things, even me, like in growing a business, like I'm just under the million mark lifetime, but I find myself comparing myself to the very like scrappy early days of my business where I was just like, I would just slap up whatever I wanted. And now it feels, oh no, like I'm Mariella, the brand. And I
Yeah.
can't do that anymore. And it can become very easy to become almost like a caricature of your brand and just talking about your offers and you lose yourself. I would love to hear how you navigated that because I think that is something where your brand can become stale. You start to silence yourself. You lose yourself. And talk to me about that.
Girl, that is so funny. Like we had a marketing meeting today about my hair. Like, I can't even believe it's, do I do
Yeah.
a wig? Do I do a sew-in? What are we doing? Okay.
Yeah.
Hashtag Black Girl Problem, trying to figure out what hairstyle is going to be the easiest, but still make me look like an adult that you could trust. It's just,
Yeah.
wow. Yeah. I've been through so many iterations of that, of just figuring out like, how do I want to show up? How do I want to be seen? That's a big part of a decision that you
Yeah.
need to make as a brand.
Mhm.
I've had seasons for sure where I've shrunk. I notice a pattern of shrinking when I'm at like the height of the success of my business, because again,
Mhm.
that's also the height of the criticism. And it's, damn,
Yeah.
I don't want to deal with this. Like, I personally, I think that building a personal brand is one of the fastest tracks to building a successful business and becoming profitable.
Yeah.
But I also at the same time want to make as much money as possible in the time frame that I have the mental capacity for, and then disappear. Like, I personally don't care about the legacy of my name being known. I care about the
Mhm.
legacy of making sure my kids have money. Like, I
Yeah.
don't love the, I'm blessed and fortunate, so I don't want it to be taken away before I'm ready, that people do know me, but I'm also like
Yeah.
not thirsty to be known because of what can come
Yeah.
with it. And
Yeah.
so I think even when I introduced faith into my business, it was during a time where I realized I was getting a lot of praise and people really loved
Mhm.
my brand and they love Maya and they're fangirling over Maya.
Yeah.
And I never experienced that level of support and having fans before.
Yeah.
And again, I'm so grateful for it now, but I didn't know how to navigate it. I thought it was a little bit strange. And I think I had built a cult like following. And I'm like, wait, I'm
Mhm.
like, do you guys know about Jesus? Let me tell you about him, because this is not
Yeah.
me. Please don't worship me. So I found
That makes
myself
sense. So like the
shrinking.
discomfort around that, where you're like, this isn't what I intended to create. I'm not the person that wants to receive this.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So I found myself shrinking behind my faith. I'm really grateful that I introduced it, because it's a natural part of just who I am. But
Yeah.
there's definitely a difference between introducing your faith because it's just part of your voice versus bringing it to the forefront in order to shrink and in order to hide. So just from a level of maturity, I had to learn how to find that balance. I had to learn how to, without taking it to my head, I had to learn how to receive praise and be humble in my own time with God versus that fake humility of, no, I can't accept your praise. So just learning how to find that
Yeah.
balance of, yeah, show up. You are who you are. You have helped these people receive the positive acknowledgement, and just keep showing up as you are.
Yeah. And then even with them not attaching yourself to it, because I think that, yeah, it feels great to receive it. But then I think that the dependency on it, it's like then your identity can
Yeah.
start to get wrapped up in like how you're being received and you
Yeah.
lose your connection.
Yeah.
To
It's whether the feedback is positive or negative, I can't make it mean anything about me.
That's the hardest part. Oh, I feel like if there would be one thing that I would reject the most in like therapy or some, I feel like this is, and I'm an eldest daughter as well. I have two younger sisters. So I feel like that's another level of daughter of immigrants
Mm.
where it's like, no, but it does. And that's the thing that of unlearning like other people's perceptions, what they have to say about you is not as important as what you have to, because we are taught that
Right.
does have value and that our value
Yeah.
is determined by others.
Yeah. And I think it's challenging too, because as a brand, intentionally building a brand is about creating a perception of how you want to be seen. So it's finding that balance of like, how do I do the work to be seen a certain way without attaching it to my identity? And I think that's the separate thing. Knowing that my identity and my personal brand aren't in a complete overlap. Maya Elious, the
Yes.
human, and the
Mhm.
daughter, and the future wife, and the friend, and the aunt, she is separate than the professional. The personal brand is the professional side
The
of me, but it's
professional
not my
person.
entire identity.
That's a perfect segue because I think that there's a couple of different ways I think that once you start to have quote unquote success and like more eyeballs and expectations that we put on ourselves and that other people put on us, is that we can either go the route of it becomes about our offers and like our successes and like the numbers and people, we don't share those parts about ourselves anymore. Yeah. Or it can go to, I can't actually share certain things about my life, but so it's the different kind of, do you hide behind your offers or do you feel like you have to change who you are? I'm wondering how you've navigated like how you decide what is in your personal, professional brand versus the things that you hold dear, including things like losses or like when things don't go well, all of that. Because I think there's a point where we're not out there on the internet, like Instagram streets, like sharing all of these vulnerable like parts. And that's not what personal brand needs to be.
Yeah.
How do you decide this is for me and this is for my business when it comes to your
Yeah,
personal brand?
that's a great question because I do think sometimes that as your brand evolves, you can people sometimes don't start to see the human side of you and you just become, like you said, this caricature.
Yeah.
It's my Elious the brand. It's the
Yeah.
lady who creates Impact Weekend. It's the lady
Hmm.
who made $100,000 in a month. And I think when I start to recognize that people are dehumanizing me, I'm like, maybe I need to be intentional about adding a level of humanization to my brand. And I think it is important to understand that humanizing your brand doesn't mean being sloppy. It doesn't mean just telling all
That's a
of your
good point.
business, but it's
Hmm.
understanding what is the connection point between me and my ideal client. That's all it really means to humanize your brand. So I think we minimize things as simple as like sharing your morning routine or what you eat or what your day-to-day lifestyle is like. People can
Yes.
connect off of that. Like it's important that we don't make the assumption that the only form of connection is through trauma. You don't need to be
Yeah, or
trauma bonding with your
vulnerability.
audience. Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
but I think also vulnerability also doesn't have to mean something that's at your detriment. I think vulnerability for me can be like, man, I'm having a tough time finding somebody to help me with my meal prep, or I had an annoying day because I needed to go to the DMV. That's
Mhm.
vulnerable without it being to the detriment of me and myself. And so when I'm telling people share your brand story. I have
Mhm.
a framework for brand story where it's you talk about your past in terms of your experience, you talk about a
Yes.
level of pain that you dealt with, but there
Yes.
has to be a pivot point because girl,
Yeah.
if you're still stuck in that pain, you are making yourself vulnerable to attacks that you are not ready for. If you're
Yeah.
telling this story and you still feel a trigger,
Yeah.
that's not the part of your personal branding you'd be sharing,
Yeah.
right? That would
Yeah.
be like me talking about dropping out of college before I resolved my relationship with my
Yeah,
parents.
because
I
you then
only share
introduce
that
other
story.
people as energy points, like other people and their opinions and all of that, almost to something that you're still nurturing yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
I've
at the
heard
end
it
of the day,
described as
like,
like wound or what's it called? Scab, like a scab versus a wound. So it's like the
got
wound
you.
is
Yeah,
open, but the scab is like it's not vulnerable to infection anymore.
exactly.
You've
Yeah,
tended to it and now you can talk about it.
exactly. Yeah. So if you
Yeah,
don't have a solution to the problems that you dealt with, you don't need to be telling that part of your story.
that makes sense. I think when you were talking about that vulnerability doesn't always have to be to your detriment, what it made me think about that I wanted to ask you about, because it's a crossover with what I do, which is helping women of color and daughters of immigrants with their thought leadership. And that I consider us all to be thought leaders because our voices have not been centered. So we
Mhm.
see the unseen, we see opportunities that other people don't see. When I think about vulnerability, I think that having thought leadership is vulnerable because you have a perspective and it's not the norm. So
Mhm.
you have to like choose a lane sometimes. And you're just
Yeah.
like, wait a minute, am I going to be on this lane by myself? Does this make sense? And guessing stuff that you don't hear other people doing and saying. I would love to hear if just what that's looked like for you as far as you're saying or doing something other people aren't and having to stand by that because that's also vulnerable.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's such a vital part of establishing your message, though, and building your
Yeah.
personal brand. It is literally what do you stand for? If you can't be clear on that, you're not yet ready to build a personal brand. People need to know exactly what you stand for, exactly
Yeah.
what your philosophies are, and you want to be polarizing. It's incredibly important to
Mhm.
be polarizing because people are looking for you to have a very clear stance so they know who to follow. Like, I think for a while, my messaging was around growing organically because then the opposing idea is no, you need ads. And so I
Yeah.
grew my brand to 1 million organically.
Uh,
So I think it's just important to just be very clear on what do I want to really go in on? What is the philosophy that I really want to drive home? And it wasn't even that like I'm trying to sell people on organic, but that was one way that I stood out. I think another way that I stand out is really believing that messaging is the number one skill set that you need to generate sales as a personal brand. Somebody else can say, no, you need social media, or no, you need email. Like they could say whatever, but
yeah.
I'm standing 10 toes down on business that messaging
Mhm.
is the number one skill set that you need. So really you have to say, what is my core philosophy
Yeah.
that you cannot shift about me. And you have to feel very rooted in that. So
Hmm.
you aren't easily swayed by people's opinions about what you're
Yeah.
doing.
It makes me think about we all need some hills we're willing to die on, figuratively
Yes.
speaking, because that is they tend to be rooted either in your story to be like, and
Yeah.
because of this is what I believe, or your values. And people will look to be like, do you, is that shaky? Because that's
Hmm.
leadership. And it's the only way you really can stand out. Because if you're just like being cute and safe, it's, yeah, like you
Exactly.
said, if you don't stand in your core philosophies, like you don't stand out.
Exactly.
I'd love to hear just about even just your journey to scaling beyond, I would say maybe like the multiple 6 to 7. It's like you see yourself as almost like a solopreneur. Maybe you have a team member or something. And then eventually you're growing a business, you have a team, you start to see yourself like as a brand.
Mhm.
What would you say are some of the things that people in the process of trying to like scale to 1 million get, maybe it was something that you got wrong or like mistakes that you made? Because I think that we tend to want to get to this like elusive mark
Yeah.
and we think it's going to take something, but it really takes something else. What do you think it really took
Yeah.
for you to hit like that first $1 million year? Is
Yeah. There's going to be a difference between hitting your first $100,000 a year to $1 million a year. So just
Mhm.
depending on where you are, my
Yeah.
advice would be different. But
Yeah. So maybe like the multiple six, because I think
yeah,
that sometimes it's you'll do like the multiple six and then you'll repeat your income. And then like another thing, because
yes,
you're like launching, there's like different skill sets that I think
yeah,
when you're first growing, you're like sales, messaging, content. But then I think
yeah,
when you're scaling, you're selling things that aren't access to you. And now you're having to like appeal to people faster, convert leads faster, like your identity is going to have to shift. There's just a lot of things that I think are almost like
yeah,
have to work in conjunction for you to get there because you're not selling the same way that you were when you were like, people were working with you
yeah.
directly. And now they're in your programs and now they're in your brand and now they're with your team and like all of that.
Yeah. I definitely think when we're thinking about multiple six figures, it's you want to, first of all, make sure your price points even make sense. I talk to my clients a lot about capacity because I want them to hit their revenue goals, but I need them to get to the finish line whole, which is something that I always say.
Mm.
Yeah, you're telling me you want to make $250,000. Do you have $250,000 capacity at your price point?
That makes
So
sense.
if
Like
we
numbers
first,
wise, what would that look like with your current offers? And given how you're serving the client, does this even make sense? Like that.
exactly.
Yes, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
So if you're doing one-on-one and you have your price point is $1,000, like how many people are you gonna have to serve to make
Yeah.
250,000? Do
And
you
it's like,
have the
and what are you
capacity to serve?
delivering for that 1,000? Because sometimes it's, wow, you're giving a lot for
Exactly.
that. And does that even make sense? Yes. Is it sustainable for you? So that makes
Yeah.
sense.
First of all, just making sure they have capacity. And if they don't, then they have to then either increase their price point or create something that is scalable. So they
Yeah.
either increase the level of access to them or they make the access a little bit more open to going from one-on-one to a group. That's really the first thing. It really comes down to it being a numbers game, which I don't think many new entrepreneurs are really paying attention to numbers. I do believe that a lot of new entrepreneurs are now getting caught up in generic content quotas of I need to
Mhm.
post 3 times a week. And that's fine. Do you know what these posts are doing? Every single post should be tied to a goal. Is the post meant
Yeah.
to build trust? So you're creating trust with your existing audience or a new audience. Is the post designed to get people to book a call with you or join your email list, or is the post directly tied to an offer that you have? But many times we're just generically doing things, and that's what leads to burnout. We're doing all of these things that's not leading to results, and we're wondering, am I even equipped to be an entrepreneur? And it's, yeah, you have what it takes. You're just not doing what it takes. And you
Yeah.
think you're
Almost.
doing what it takes, but you're really not.
It's almost like if you're taking the actions when you say like the content's getting put out, the number of hours is being worked. The effort is happening, but it isn't necessarily it's spraying like a garden hose in like different directions.
Yeah, it's
So
just
I
not
can
tied to
see.
an ROI. It's really as simple as
Yeah.
that. Everything has
Yeah.
to be tied to an ROI. I do team retreats with my team, and we always go back to what's the vision of the company? What are our values?
Hmm.
What's our mission? What are our core goals every quarter? Then, when we look at projects and launches, we say, how does this align with what we said we wanted to do at the team retreat? If our goal is to make how much ever this month, how does this tie to me making money, me and my company? Because if it doesn't, you're introducing a distraction to me. And I'm really
Oh,
just
this
not
makes
interested
sense.
in being distracted.
Mm. So I feel like that's another thing with a multi-seven figure business is if we're going to do something, is it feeding everything else or are we just like pouring water into a different plant that's like a little island over here? Like
Yeah.
everything, I think about how sometimes when I talk to my clients, I'm like, let's not create islands. Is everything connected somehow to a bridge? What is the point of us doing this? But I love that you said also that you and your team talk about, is this connected to our vision? So that you're
Yeah.
not just distracted with like pop-up ideas and things like that because it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, exactly. And I think even like a good book for that, there's this book called The One Thing by Gary Keller. I'm not sure if you've read it,
Oh, my
but
coach talked to us about this on like
mm,
recently about the
okay, so
one
it's
thing.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So confirmation. But yeah, I read this book a couple years ago. And it's I think the great thing about educating yourself, pouring into yourself, reading books, it's like it's stuff, but it's also stuff that you want just reestablished and rooted in your mind.
Yeah.
And this is really why I believe just renewing our minds. It's not about go learn something new. It's about relearn what you already know to make sure that you're actually living it. So
Yeah.
just keeping in top of mind, what is the one thing I need to be focused on to ensure that I hit my revenue goals or whatever your goal is.
And possibly even like I think about how we might have heard something, but like the identity at that time couldn't receive it. But like your current
Yeah.
identity can, or your circumstances in your business have changed to where you heard something, but you weren't actually sitting in it. Like you have to be
Yeah,
in it to define it, to do it.
for
And so it's,
sure.
I feel like that's a skill set as an entrepreneur is almost like it doesn't matter. There's almost a humility around you are constantly learning. You can't be like, oh, I know that already. Oh, I tried that already. Oh, I did that already. And it's, did you? Possibly.
Yes, that is. I just don't care what you know already if you don't have results that are produced from your knowledge. It just
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, you just have to, and also I think that it's even if you do something and it gets a certain result and it isn't what you wanted, you at least need to have some sort of a theory as to why and what you're going to do. I just feel like there is no, it didn't work. I'm like, what, why, what about it? What are you going to do next? There is no, it doesn't work.
Exactly. Or my clients will say it didn't work. And I'm like, no, you tried once. So that's not
That's
enough
right.
data. No, it's not that it didn't work. It's that you didn't work because you
Yeah.
doing something one time is not work.
No, it's not. I think with this, I want to just, because I know that we're getting towards the end of our interview and I want to respect your time, but I loved what you were saying just around really like owning the fact that you are a representative of your company, your brand, the things that you decide to share versus the things that are like yours and all of that. When I think about my audience being daughters of immigrants and being having to feel safe to share who they are and their stories and their perspectives and all of that from you, them seeing your business, the fact that you have a coaching business, you run events, you have a sports an athletic line. When you speak to specifically to the daughters of immigrants who maybe are still in the stage of I don't want to fail, I don't want to be wrong. What if I disappoint people? What would you say from where you're standing now to them who are they've already committed to, they have businesses, but they're holding themselves back, silencing themselves, second guessing? What would you
Yeah.
offer the daughters of immigrants?
Oh my gosh. I would say you're disappointing yourself. You're failing yourself. You are neglecting yourself. And that's the most harmful thing about people pleasing is that we neglect ourselves. And especially to daughters of immigrants who have a level of faith, which I imagine, like I would say, the
Mm-hmm.
majority of my clients are Christian women. Then there's a small percent who are Muslim, and then just another small other percent that's I don't
Mm-hmm.
subscribe to a religion, but I believe in God. And
Yes.
it's like many of them feel like the work that they are called to do is a calling from God. So it's who are you going to worship? Are you going to worship your parents or are you going to worship God? Are you going to worship
Oh,
the random strangers on the internet or are you going to
mm,
worship God? So it's
yeah.
really just about prioritizing whose voice you're listening to. And if you want to neglect God and neglect yourself to appease other people.
You know what this made me think about? Because I know I'll hear this with my clients in particular, because many of them have grown up with a Catholic background and they have just their experiences with religion and they're healing that
Mhm.
is even if it's ancestors, even if it's like your ancestors didn't sacrifice so much for us to be here, like they're supporting you, they're guiding you. Just the concept of we know we're not alone. I feel like that I'll take that to say
Mm.
God is walking with you, your ancestors are walking with you, like you are here because you're following that, and to listen to that nudge, because there's that. And then there's the what are people going to think criticism, which is a different voice.
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
that's a beautiful reminder. Is there anything that you didn't get to talk about or say that or share that you would like to now? Just about how how you can help people, how they can enter into your world, or just a message, anything that you didn't get to share?
Yeah, I would say you really have to decide who you want to be. You have to decide who you want to be independent of the fear of what other people think of you. Because until you get rooted and established in your identity, you're going to be walking a path that is trying to please other people, and you will never be fulfilled. You will never be satisfied, and you will never, ever fulfill your calling not knowing who you are. Because you can only fulfill your calling walking in your true identity. So you have to
Only
start with
fulfill your
that.
calling.
You get clear on who you're called to be, and you say, what sacrifices do I need to make to be her? Because it will require a sacrifice. One of the top sacrifices is going to be giving up the need for approval from other people. So decide who you want to be, and then look to guidance for next steps on that. Like when my clients come to me, I tell them, I am not your God, but I am your guide. But you have to first know what God told you to do before I can guide you, or else we're guessing out here. And you might have experienced this as a coach. I've been coaching for 10 years now, and I've had instances where clients have come to me wanting to do one thing and they change their mind. And it's because they weren't rooted and established in what they should be doing.
What I see that as is outsourcing. It's like where you're outsourcing your inner guidance, or you're outsourcing your guidance to someone else telling you what to do because that's what you were accustomed to doing it. And when that supersedes your own, then that's where we start to see people like,
exactly. Yeah. Which is why I'm like, girl, if you think I'm your Lord and Savior, I'm not. So
nobody is. Like,
nobody
no
is at all. Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly. Girl, do I look like I died on the cross for you? I don't. My wrists are, there's no holes in these wrists. Okay. So you're going to have to go figure that out with God and then come back to me. So I would say get rooted in your identity. Know that first before you go seek guidance, so you're not guided in the wrong direction. And then for those of you that want to learn more about me, and if you enjoyed this episode, I would love to hear your perspective and feedback on it. Just send me a DM. I'm really responsive on my Instagram at my Elious, MAYAELIOUS. And if you are looking to build your brand in an authentic way, I created a free checklist called the Build Your Online Brand Checklist for 25 things I would do if I was building my brand from scratch. And if you go to builttoimpact.com/BYOB, you can get that right now for free.
Perfect. And we're going to put all of your links, and we'll double check with your team just to make sure that we've got all of that. And we'll put them in the show notes of the episode. And when we send the email out to our list, we'll share all of that because this is so good. I love that we got to talk about personal branding from the daughter of immigrant perspective. I hope that's not anything you've ever talked about before, but I'm always going to put that lens on it.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me.
Yes. Thank you so much, Maya.